My name is Thalia Carter, 28 years old, and this was the moment my family decided I didn't belong anymore. Sunlight poured through the bay windows, making the kitchen glow like something out of a magazine spread, but the warmth was fake. I sat at the same table where I used to do math homework, and now, across from me, Mom folded her arms like I was a stranger. Dad flipped open his leather folio like he was presenting quarterly losses, not ending a daughter's place in her own home. And Sierra, late as always, laughing like this was brunch and not an ambush. They didn't argue. They didn't explain. They just handed me the papers. The house, gone. The proceeds, Sierra's. My gift, the backyard shed, for $1. The same shed where I used to cry after being told I wasn't good enough. After they spent my college fund on Sierra's braces. After every maybe next time promotion, Dad blocked behind closed doors. Their smiles were rehearsed. Their cruelty, quiet. And as I signed the transfer papers with shaking hands but steady voice, one thought burned through me. You didn't just push me out. You handed me a blueprint. Before I tell you how that shed became the tallest structure on this street, how I turned humiliation into the foundation for something none of them saw coming, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been pushed aside by your own family? And if you want more stories where betrayal turns into quiet, satisfying justice, hit subscribe. This one's for you. Sunlight filtered through the bay windows, splashing golden light onto the quartz countertops like some divine blessing. It made everything look too warm, too safe. Like this was a place of comfort, not a battlefield. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd once done my 7th grade math homework, feet barely reaching the floor, asking Mom for help. Now she stood across from me with her arms folded, eyes expressionless. Dad sat beside her, cool and deliberate, like a man about to deliver disappointing quarterly earnings. Sierra entered last. Late, of course, with her Lululemon leggings, fake laugh, and diamond ring the size of a Skittle. She flopped into the chair across from me like this was brunch and not an ambush. I used to think the worst betrayal would come from strangers. I was wrong. It wears your last name. I didn't speak that thought aloud. I didn't have to. Mom smiled, a tight-lipped, polite little expression, the kind she used when rejecting Costco samples. We wanted to have a little family moment, she said. My stomach turned. Dad reached into his leather folio and withdrew a folder. Thick, precise, labeled in his clean block handwriting, transfer of property, Carter residence. You're selling the house? My voice didn't rise. I already knew. He nodded. We accepted an offer last week. Sierra and Marcus need space and timing's good with the market. Mom slid the folder to me like it was a menu. Sierra beamed. We're getting a place in Summit Heights. 5 bedrooms, wraparound porch, pool. You'll love it. I didn't ask who you referred to because I knew it wasn't me. The proceeds from the sale, Dad continued, are going toward their down payment. And as for you, Thalia, we have a gift. Mom gestured to another envelope, thinner, almost sheepish-looking beside the others. A gift? I echoed. Dad pulled out a deed. It's the shed, in the backyard. On paper, it's being transferred to your name. Symbolic, mostly. But it's yours now. For $1. There was a pause. The kind where your brain tries to fill silence with reason and then fails. Sierra laughed. You mean the glorified doghouse? I thought we were going to turn that into a pool house or maybe knock it down. Mom glanced at her. Sierra. What? She always liked that little corner. Remember how she used to hide in there when she got moody? I remembered. I remembered the smell of cedar and dust. I remembered hiding there after failing my driving test. After finding out my college fund went to cover Sierra's braces. After discovering my promotion had been delayed because Dad didn't think I was quite ready. I looked at the papers in front of me. A parcel map. The property line sliced right behind the hydrangea hedge. The main house, the patio, the lawn, gone. All that remained in my name was a sliver, the edge. But the shed did have its own side entrance. A back gate, once rusted shut, had been repaired. A separation. I picked up the pen. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. "I hope you got a good price. For everything that used to mean something." The pen scratched against the paper. I signed where they told me to. The contract folded back into Dad's folder like nothing had ever happened. Sierra checked her phone. "We're late for cake testing. Can we wrap this up?" I stood. No tears, no begging, just a long exhale. As I walked out, they thought they'd erased me, but they'd just handed me a blueprint. There's a difference between being thrown away and walking away with something they didn't understand. The rain started just after midnight, slow and mocking, as if the sky itself was sighing at me. Inside the shed, it sounded louder than it should have. Tin roof, warped wood, a few holes that I hadn't noticed before. Water slid down the corners in trickles, tapping against cardboard boxes like a second hand ticking. I sat cross-legged on a faded sleeping bag, arms tucked inside a hoodie that used to be Dad's. Even the rats avoided me tonight. Just one mouse watched from the corner, nibbling something invisible, unbothered by my presence. Zoning laws are more powerful than family dinners. Grandpa said that once. I'd rolled my eyes back then, distracted by prom or calculus or whatever teenage nonsense had consumed me. Now it echoed in my head like prophecy. At dawn, the rain broke. The sky turned an anemic gray. I didn't hear Ethan arrive. I just smelled coffee and turned to find him standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups like peace offerings. His hair was damp, curls dripping under the hood of his jacket, but his expression was unreadable. Same as high school. He stepped inside, ducking slightly under the low beam. "Still standing," he murmured, nodding toward the walls. "Barely," I replied, taking the cup. "Black. Just how I liked it." He remembered. "You sure you want to do this here?" he asked, brushing dust off a metal stool and unfolding a roll of yellowed maps onto the makeshift table. 2 crates and a plank of wood. "I could get you something. Warmer." I stared at the parcel diagram he'd laid out. "This is warm," I said, "compared to what's inside that house." He didn't press. He just traced the boundaries with his finger. "This section. Here." He tapped a block of land neatly boxed between hedges and a stone path. "Your grandfather subdivided it in 1973. Your parents either forgot or they thought it didn't matter because no one would ever build back here." "Why does it matter?" I asked, sipping the bitter coffee. "Because it's legally separate. You have full rights, residential zoning. You could build up to 3 stories if you follow setback rules." I blinked. 3? He nodded. "Minimalist design. Steel, glass, floor-to-ceiling windows. Nothing to obstruct the view." I looked past him, out the open door. From this angle, I could see the fence line of Sierra's new backyard, her stupid pergola, the edge of what I assumed would soon be a hot tub. Ethan followed my gaze. "You could build it right here, tall enough to cast a shadow over everything." My fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "They think I'll sleep here. Quietly. Fade out." "You don't have to." I stared at the parcel outline again. The shed wasn't just a humiliation. It was a loophole. A legal crack no one expected to be used. "We could go 3 stories," Ethan said. I nodded. "Make it tall enough to cast a shadow." We didn't need to say anything else. The blueprint in his hand wasn't just architecture. It was defiance. Every line, a boundary they forgot to erase. His phone buzzed. He glanced down and then turned it toward me. "Someone's watching," he said. "A message from Margaret Carter. Don't do anything stupid." I smiled and typed back. Too late. She used to laugh from her balcony. This morning she screamed from her slippers. The rumble of the bulldozer wasn't deafening. It was deliberate. Each mechanical growl sliced through the morning silence like a blade. Dew still clung to the petals of the Carter estate's manicured hydrangeas, but tranquility had evaporated. I stood a few paces from the shed, coffee in hand, steam curling in the crisp morning air. The same shed Sierra had once called a glorified doghouse was now crumbling under the weight of iron. Splinters flew. Metal screamed. And Sierra? She came charging out like a banshee, hair undone, silk robe barely tied, fuzzy slippers flopping against the stone patio. "That's vandalism," she shrieked, her voice already hoarse. "You can't do this." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Ethan stood next to me, tablet in hand, tracking progress. The permits were clean. The deed was mine. Every zoning regulation, checked, signed, sealed. Sierra stomped closer, nostrils flared. "I will have you arrested." "Good morning to you too," Ethan murmured without looking up. She turned her fury on him, eyes darting between us like she'd walked into a conspiracy theory. "Daniel!" she shouted over her shoulder. "Call the police." Daniel emerged slowly from the villa's back porch, arms crossed. He didn't move toward her. He didn't speak. But his phone was in his hand, pointed directly at her. That's when Deborah Langston made her appearance. Of course she did. Clipboard in hand, the neighbor from 2 doors down moved like a politician, brisk and offended. "I've already got 11 signatures," she said, waving the clipboard. "This eyesore will drive our property values into the gutter. That structure destroys the sightline. We bought into exclusivity, not construction zones." I blinked slowly. "Morning, Deborah." She offered a sugar-coated smile. "Thalia, I know you're going through something, but maybe this isn't the right way to heal." Ethan tilted the tablet toward her. "Did you know this lot was zoned independently in 1973? Private building rights?" "I don't care about legal gymnastics," Deborah snapped. "This is about community." "Exactly," I replied. "And for once, I'm part of it." Sierra lunged forward. "You're doing this out of spite." I turned my head slowly toward her. "Number, I'm doing this because you thought I never would." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Behind her, Daniel kept recording. His expression was unreadable, calculating. The bulldozer groaned forward again, taking the last of the roof. The shed crumpled like paper. Dust danced in the morning light. Ethan adjusted a setting on the screen. I sipped my coffee. And then, as if summoned by drama, a man in a windbreaker bearing the city's emblem stepped through the gate. He held a folder. "Thalia Carter?" he asked, looking between us. "We need to talk about your permits. There's been a petition." He pressed play, and her voice filled the room. Not sweet, not kind, just venom. The audio crackled for a second before Sierra's unmistakable voice emerged. Sharp, precise, condescending. The file had no title, no timestamp, just cold words spilling from the laptop's tinny speakers. Thalia didn't blink. She didn't look at Daniel either, who sat across the table with his hands knotted in guilt. "She doesn't deserve to have been born in this house." Sierra's voice said flatly, "The shed is a message. She'll wake up every day reminded of where she stands." Daniel flinched. Attorney Keller paused his scribbling and looked up. "That's the first one," Daniel muttered. "There are others." Thalia leaned back, her arms crossed. "That'll do for now." It was Tuesday morning. Rain speckled the window panes of Keller's minimalist office. Bare concrete walls, a single row of succulents on a steel shelf, and architectural renderings of the Spite House on the conference table. The building hadn't even risen yet, but in this room, blueprints already felt like weapons. Keller adjusted his glasses. "This tape is admissible under one-party consent, but we'll need to frame a narrative, one that contrasts her aggression with your restraint." "I'm not interested in press conferences," Thalia said. "Then you're doing it right," Ethan interjected from the corner, coffee in hand. "Let them talk first. Let them get sloppy." Keller tapped his pen. "We'll draft a motion to counterclaim. Her statements are clear enough to imply emotional harm. And there's an angle on financial coercion, too, if she leveraged your parents' decision. Daniel looked miserable. She said worse. Later. I didn't mean for this to happen. Thalia finally turned to him. You didn't mean for it to happen? Or you didn't mean for me to react? Silence. I get it, she continued, calmer than the air around her. You loved the version of her that loved you back. That's not betrayal. That's miscalculation. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. The laptop chimed. An email alert from Keller's assistant. Draft complete. It would be filed that afternoon. Local outlets were already circling like vultures. One had called the diner where Thalia worked, asking if the rumors about the backyard mansion war were true. She hadn't answered. Not yet. She wants you to break character, Ethan said softly. Thalia exhaled. She always did. Keller slid a folder toward her. This is just the beginning. When this goes public, she'll escalate. Are you ready for that? Thalia smiled faintly. That's the difference between her and me. She escalates out of fear. I escalate by design. Daniel leaned forward, voice low. You're not going to stop, are you? Not until she sees the view she paid for, blocked by her own words. As the room quieted, Thalia's phone buzzed. A text from Sierra lit up the screen. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever? She typed back without hesitation. No, just patient. The foundation cracked. Not the concrete one, the one held together by fear and secrets. The Carter mansion glowed under chandeliers, but even the crystal light couldn't soften the edges of tension that rippled through the living room. Laughter felt choreographed. Wine glasses clinked with restraint. And Sierra? She stood at the center in her pale pink cocktail dress, smile stretched tight, shoulders stiff under the weight of appearances. This was her pre-wedding party, a curated display of elegance and power. But even the guests whispered, their eyes flitting toward the windows every few minutes. Because just behind the hedges, the skeleton of a modern glass and steel structure had begun to rise. Every new steel beam felt like a vein of defiance. Relax, Margaret Carter hissed into Sierra's ear. You just have to get through this week. Sierra's laugh came too fast, too brittle. She won't ruin this. But she already had. 2 blocks away, the town hall buzzed with quiet electricity. I sat near the back, beside Keller and Ethan, listening to the zoning committee deliberate. Across the aisle, a few familiar faces from the neighborhood glared like I'd personally bulldozed their retirement dreams. One woman muttered about her view being obstructed by trauma. When my name was called, I stood slowly. I'm not here to undo what's been built, I said, voice even, only to continue what was once dismissed. They asked about obstruction, intention, environmental impact. I answered with permits, plans, and restraint. My anger never made it into the room. Only facts did. The mayor glanced at the documents, then at the murmuring residents. Motion denied, he said. The construction complies with all applicable code. As we stepped outside, reporters surrounded us like moths to a lit match. I kept walking. Ethan shielded me with his arm. Back at the mansion, Sierra's party was just starting to unravel. Daniel had been absent for over an hour. His absence wasn't unnoticed. It was becoming the main event. He stood now on the front lawn, in front of 3 cameras and a dozen microphones. Calm, composed. But in his eyes, something had broken free. I have nothing to celebrate tonight, he began, because I've spent months lying to myself. The crowd quieted. Someone I cared about once said our wedding was a PR stunt. That she'd do whatever it took to make sure her sister knew her place. Well, I found my place today. He pulled out his phone, tapped play. Sierra's voice filled the air. Cutting, cruel, calculating. Let the shed rot. That's the message. She'll stare at our home while living in a box. Call it poetic. Gasps. Flashes. Sierra's name became a headline in real time. Daniel looked directly at the cameras. I didn't lose a fiancé. I gained a conscience. The video went viral within the hour. Half the guests at the party left without saying goodbye. The press circled the block like sharks tasting blood. By morning, public opinion was divided. Some called me petty, others called me patient, but none of them ignored me. Inside the Carter mansion's dressing room, Sierra stood alone, breathing hard. Her dress shimmered under the mirror's lights, but her eyes were glassy. With one violent motion, she grabbed a full glass of red wine and hurled it. Crimson splattered across the mirror. Fractures spread in jagged lines. She ruined everything. The windows reflected everything they tried to hide. And I didn't look away. Late summer light poured in from every direction, coating the floor in honeyed streaks. I stood barefoot on the rooftop terrace, the wind threading through my hair. Below me, the Carter mansion looked smaller than I remembered, like a prop that had outlived its scene. I had received the email that morning. A generic listing. No personalization, no apology. Carter residence now on the market. Asking price, $2.9 million. I didn't click the link. I didn't need to. I knew every hallway, every lie folded into its drywall. There was nothing there I wanted to reclaim. Ethan was already upstairs, 2 mugs of coffee waiting on the edge of the glass railing. He didn't say anything. He never did when words would only bruise the silence. He just sat cross-legged beside me, his shirt sleeves rolled up, face calm. The house was done, all 3 floors of it, steel ribs and glass bones, angled perfectly to catch the morning sun, and cast a long shadow by afternoon. Not once did I apologize for how it changed the view. It wasn't built to please. From up here, you could see the entire valley. The trails that led down toward the city, the bend in the river, the neighborhood trying not to look directly at me. And on the back lawn of the Carter mansion, Sierra was packing boxes. She didn't look up once, didn't wave, didn't curse. I could tell she felt the windows staring back. The front door slammed shut an hour later. A black SUV pulled away, and just like that, the golden child exited the stage. No curtain call. The wind changed direction. The old wind chimes, rescued from the shed before it was torn down, sang soft, irregular notes from their hook near the stairs. I smiled faintly. Each rusted clink reminded me. That place had been meant to shame me. Now it warmed my living room as reclaimed wood and story. I pulled my notebook from my back pocket. The leather was worn from months of sketches, court notes, and half-dreamt futures. On the last page, I wrote, "Some homes you build. Others, you survive." I closed the cover and rested it on the railing. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Ethan went to get it. A few minutes later, he returned with a wicker basket. Orange blossoms tucked carefully beside a folded card. Deborah's name was on it. I didn't open the note. The flowers were enough. Some neighbors hadn't forgiven. Some never would. But one had tried. I sat beside Ethan again. Neither of us spoke. The sky turned bronze. The glass around us flickered with reflections. Pieces of myself I thought I'd buried, rising with the evening light. When they gave me that shed, they didn't expect me to build something taller than their love. But I did. The morning after the for sale sign appeared on the Carter lawn, I didn't rush to check the listing. I just stood at the rooftop of what they once called a doghouse plot and let the wind do what it always does, clear out what doesn't belong. Sierra didn't slam the doors when she left. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She packed in silence, like someone erasing their own footprints, hoping no one would notice they'd ever stood there. From above, I could see the moving truck turn out of the cul-de-sac, rolling past the cracked sidewalk where we used to play chalk games. She didn't look back. I didn't wave. The valley didn't care. Ethan didn't say anything either. He brought coffee, same as always, and sat beside me with that quiet presence of someone who never needed to be loud to be heard. We watched the sky together. His shoulder just close enough to remind me I wasn't alone, just far enough to let me choose if I wanted comfort. The old wind chimes I salvaged from the shed, bent, rusted, but still defiant. now hung from the corner beam above the terrace. They rang with the same hollow defiance I used to carry in my chest. Now, it sounded lighter. I didn't buy the Carter house. I had the means. But that was never the point. If I took it back, I'd be stepping back into their games. Instead, I let it go. Like a carcass I no longer needed to gnaw meaning from. Let someone else repaint the walls. Let someone else scrub the secrets from the floors. I had already built what I needed. Neighbors still watched, of course. Deborah Langston left a basket of orange blossoms on my doorstep. No note, just flowers and silence. I didn't bring them in. I just stood there and breathed in the scent. Some apologies don't need to be accepted, just acknowledged. Daniel never came by. I imagine he's rebuilding too, in his own way. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you were wrong and stop letting someone else's poison speak for you. He did that. That was enough. My parents? I haven't heard from them. Not since the papers went public. Not since Sierra's PR stunt blew up in her face. Maybe they're still trying to spin the story into something they can live with. Maybe not. Either way, the silence from them feels less like punishment and more like peace. I went back down to the first floor, where the living room is framed with beams from the original shed. You can still see the nails, the imperfections. I didn't cover them up. They're proof of where it started. Not scars, just structure. At the back wall, I pinned a copy of the land deed from 1973. My grandfather's signature is faded but still visible. Under it, I wrote a single sentence in black ink. Some homes you build. Others, you survive. Then I walked back up to the roof one last time. Not to check on anything, just to sit. To let the sunlight hit my face, to hear the valley breathe. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. A blueprint made from broken trust and quiet rage. And when I looked out, over the rooftops, past the fences, I finally understood something. They didn't take everything from me. They handed me just enough to build something that stood longer than their approval. She was never meant to rise. That was the unspoken rule. The shed was a sentence, not a gift. But like steel forged in fire, some people become unshakable not in spite of betrayal, but because of it. In a world where injustice often wears the face of familiarity, the boldest acts of resistance are sometimes the quietest ones, signing a paper, building a wall, or choosing not to strike back. What began as a humiliation became architecture of both a house and a self. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. So let this story be a reminder. No matter how high the mansion, its shadow cannot erase someone who dares to stand in the light. And now, as I sit here, watching the sun stretch across the steel beams of the house I built, the one they thought I never would, I realize something. They didn't just give me a shed. They gave me clarity. They gave me proof of how small their vision for me was, and how big mine could become. For years, I thought being part of this family meant shrinking myself just enough to fit, smiling at the right moments, swallowing disappointment like it was another Sunday dinner side dish. I thought if I worked harder, stayed quieter, or let a few more dreams go, maybe one day I'd earn my seat at their table again. But here's the truth they never told me. Some tables aren't worth sitting at. Some invitations aren't worth waiting for. And sometimes, the smallest plot of land becomes the biggest opportunity for freedom. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about finally building something on my own terms, without asking for their permission or approval. Every floor of this house, every window that casts a shadow on their lawn, every zoning permit and blueprint, it's all been a quiet reminder. You can erase me from your plans, but you'll never erase me from the skyline. To everyone watching this, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you've had your own shed moment. Maybe you've been handed something small, broken, or humiliating, and told to make do, or worse, told it's all you'll ever deserve. If that's you, let this story be your reminder. You're allowed to redraw the lines. You're allowed to rebuild, and you're allowed to rise higher than anyone ever expected. So, thank you for watching. Truly, for sitting with me through this story, for letting me share something that started as pain and turned into architecture. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own quiet wins, or if it gave you even 1 ounce of courage to claim back your space, please hit the like button. Leave me a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever turned something small, something meant to belittle you, into something powerful? What's your blueprint moment? I read every comment. I really do. And if you want more stories about family betrayal turning into quiet, satisfying justice, about underdogs who don't yell, don't break things, but rebuild with receipts and resilience, hit subscribe. Share this video with someone you know needs to hear it, because sometimes the people who've been pushed out the hardest build the strongest foundations. Thanks again for being here. And remember, the next time someone tries to hand you a shed, ask yourself one question. How tall do I want my house to be? See you in the next story.